Bro, I saw his couple interview. Honestly, he looks very bad in this interview. Better for him training more and do less interview, you know. It's look like somebody in the house control him and tell him what to say in the interview, you know. He look very bad in the interview.
Islam Makhachev has a message for Ian Machado Garry heading into UFC 330, and it has nothing to do with wrestling, striking, or fight strategy. It's about the microphone Garry keeps picking up during fight week, and Makhachev thinks it's doing him more harm than good. I saw a couple of his interviews. Honestly, he looks very bad in these interviews, Makhachev told MMA Junkie. Better for him training more and do less interviews. It looks like somebody in the house controls him and tells him what to say in the interview. He looked very bad in the interviews, honestly. That's not a typical pre-fight jab about power or cardio or takedown defense. That's Makhachev going after Garry's media presence directly, suggesting the confident, outspoken persona that's defined Garry's entire UFC rise isn't even genuinely his own. Sit with that specific phrase for a second. Somebody in the house controls him. Makhachev isn't just saying Garry talks too much. He's implying Garry's words during fight week aren't authentic, that someone behind the scenes is scripting his bravado rather than Garry simply speaking his mind. That's a pointed, almost personal accusation, and it's a very different kind of trash talk than the usual "he can't beat me" rhetoric that dominates most UFC buildups. Makhachev didn't stop there either, taking aim at the entire persona Garry's built for himself heading into fight week. In the fight week, he always tries to be the bad guy, but he acts like he's a bad guy, Makhachev said. That's a subtle but sharp distinction. Makhachev isn't disputing that Garry plays the villain role during fight week buildups. He's disputing whether that villain persona is genuine or simply performance, a character Garry puts on rather than something that actually reflects who he is. That kind of criticism carries extra weight coming from Makhachev specifically, given his own reputation throughout the sport. He's built his entire public image around the opposite approach, calm, measured, letting his results in the cage speak far louder than anything he says beforehand. By framing Garry's confidence as performance rather than authenticity, Makhachev is essentially contrasting his own understated style against what he sees as a manufactured, media-trained version of confidence, one that he's suggesting doesn't hold up under real scrutiny. That criticism lands at a particularly interesting moment in Garry's career. He heads into this welterweight title fight off consecutive wins over former champion Belal Muhammad and top contender Carlos Prates, a genuinely strong recent stretch that's put him at 10-1 since joining the UFC back in 2021, with his only loss coming against Shavkat Rakhmonov. That's a legitimate, hard-earned resume, built against some of the toughest competition in the entire welterweight division. Garry's confidence hasn't come from nowhere. It's been backed up by real performances against real opposition. But Makhachev's comments suggest he sees a gap between that in-cage performance and the version of Garry showing up in front of cameras during fight week. Garry has become known throughout his UFC run for his unwavering confidence, frequently and publicly stating he plans to dominate and finish Makhachev specifically, rather than simply hoping to survive or eke out a decision. Makhachev's response to that kind of talk has been consistently dismissive, treating it as noise rather than a genuine threat. Everybody knows his ground game, Makhachev said, laughing when discussing Garry's chances. Everybody talking. Everybody say, "I'm going to knock out Islam. I'm going to submit Islam." But when the fight begins, they all forgot what they said. That's a genuinely pointed line, and it reflects something Makhachev has clearly grown accustomed to across his 16-fight winning streak. Opponent after opponent has entered fight week with bold public predictions about finishing him, whether through knockout power or grappling skill, and according to Makhachev, every single one of those predictions has evaporated once the cage door actually closed. He's essentially telling Garry, before the fight has even happened, that his confident talk fits a pattern Makhachev has already seen play out identically against fighter after fighter, all of whom shared Garry's exact confidence, and none of whom backed it up when it mattered. There's also a deeper layer to this feud worth understanding, tied directly to Makhachev's own history and the broader rivalry his camp represents. Makhachev's longtime association with close friend and mentor Khabib Nurmagomedov has added real weight to this buildup, given that Garry hails from the same country as Khabib's most famous rival, Conor McGregor. That connection has led plenty of fans to frame UFC 330 as a kind of spiritual sequel to the historic Khabib vs. McGregor rivalry, Dagestan vs. Ireland, Round 2, playing out through their respective protege and countrymen. Makhachev, when asked directly about that comparison, wasn't interested in playing along. "This is Dagestan vs. Ireland guy from AliExpress," Makhachev said, dismissing the entire framing in one sharp, memorable line. That comment does two things at once. It rejects the idea that Garry carries anywhere near the same weight or legitimacy as McGregor did during his own rivalry with Khabib, essentially calling Garry a knockoff version of that storyline rather than the real thing. And it reinforces exactly the same message running through Makhachev's other comments, that Garry's public persona, his confidence, his villain act, his attempt to position himself as the next great Irish rival, is more performance than substance in Makhachev's eyes. It's worth stepping back and considering why Makhachev is choosing to attack this specific angle rather than simply focusing on technical breakdowns of the actual fight. Garry's public confidence and his willingness to talk boldly about beating elite competition have become core parts of his identity as a rising star, arguably as important to his growing popularity as his actual in-cage results. By specifically targeting that persona, suggesting it's manufactured or coached rather than genuine, Makhachev is attempting to undercut something Garry and his team have clearly invested real effort into building. It's a different kind of psychological pressure than simply predicting a finish or breaking down a game plan. Garry hasn't publicly responded to these specific comments yet, but given his track record throughout this entire build-up, a response seems inevitable. He's shown no reluctance to engage directly with pre-fight trash talk throughout his UFC career, and comments this pointed, questioning the authenticity of his entire public persona, are the kind of remarks that tend to draw a sharp reply rather than silence. What makes this specific feud interesting compared to typical pre-fight trash talk is how it fits into Makhachev's broader pattern of responding to hype. He's faced confident, outspoken opponents before throughout his championship reign, and his response has consistently been the same, dismissing their words as ultimately meaningless once the actual fight begins. That pattern held true against Alexander Volkanovski, against Charles Oliveira, against Dustin Poirier, and now, according to Makhachev's own comments, he expects it to hold true against Garry as well. The stakes attached to all of this extend well beyond just fight week bragging rights, of course. Makhachev enters UFC 330 defending his welterweight title for the first time, riding a 16-fight winning streak tied for the longest in UFC history. A win keeps that streak alive and further cements his standing as one of the sport's most dominant champions across two full weight classes. Garry, meanwhile, is chasing the single biggest opportunity of his career, a chance to prove that his confidence, whatever Makhachev thinks of its authenticity, is actually backed up by championship-level substance against the consensus #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. So where does this leave things heading into August 15 in Philadelphia? Makhachev has made his read on Garry's fight week persona clear, dismissive of the interviews, skeptical of the villain act, and openly comparing the entire storyline surrounding this fight to a knockoff version of a rivalry that actually mattered. Garry, for his part, has built his entire UFC career on backing up bold talk with real performances against real competition, and this fight represents his biggest chance yet to prove that pattern holds against the toughest opponent he's ever faced. What's your take on all of this? Does Makhachev have a fair point about Garry's fight week persona feeling scripted? Or is this just standard pre-fight psychological warfare from a champion who's seen this exact confidence fail to translate again and again? It's rare for pre-fight trash talk to target something this specific, not power or skill, but the authenticity of an opponent's entire public identity. And that unusual angle alone has made this one of the more talked about exchanges heading into fight week. Let us know in the comments, and subscribe for more UFC 330 coverage as fight week approaches.